Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Monday's episode of Trending, brought to you by Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. Morning, Gareth. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks, mate. How was your weekend?
Very good, mate. Very good. Kids' parties and football sessions. Tiring, but fun.
Yeah, I also had a kid's birthday party, a 4-year-old's party. That's how I spend my weekends now.
Apparently both of us do.
Yeah, I didn't go on my own.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
My kids were invited. Okay, first story. Trump's secret Iran, or if it's an American story, I should say Iran, war plan. Now, this is something I saw this morning from Propaganda & Co., which is a Twitter account, X account, sorry, that kind of tends to expose lots of stuff to do with Israel and the Middle East in general. But actually, what he's citing here, Propaganda & Co. are citing, is an article from a journalist called Ken Kippenstein.
Easy name.
Yeah, easy for me to say. But actually, this is from around about the 19th of March, so it's not necessarily a news story, but it's new to me and therefore potentially new to you, I guess. Now, there's a few things in this that I didn't know about, and there was no media coverage. Now, the first one it cites is basically that on February the 20th, the USA bombed Iraq, which, you know, when you think of a headline, which is his secret Iran war plan, you might be thinking, well, what's bombing Iraq got to do with it? Well, what they did is they used these B-52 bombers. And at that point, Iran came out and said, this is nothing to do with bombing Iraq. This is a message to us because these bombers that have taken off from a so-called secret US base can deliver nuclear weapons. So they took it as a kind of, right, you're bombing Iraq, but we see you. We know what you're trying to do. Then, of course, on March the 30th, now this did get a little bit of coverage, but not a lot. Again, they used these B-52 bombers that were being flanked over the Mediterranean by Israeli jets and British jets. So you know, that whole Starmer-Trump frenemies thing coming into play again. Because obviously publicly they can't stand each other. Privately, they're working in unison, as they always are. Now, this was supposedly a drill. So a couple of US news outlets said, no, it was just a routine drill over the Mediterranean. Some allied partners working together and all this kind of stuff. The Times of Israel were slightly more honest when they said what it was essentially preparation for a preemptive strike on Iran.
Yep.
With the US and Israel basically the main two, because obviously it's the US doing it on behalf of Israel, but the UK in there as well. Now, the article then goes on to quote a couple of Pentagon documents and a retired colonel who's basically explaining what these documents mean. I think, you know, someone like us that doesn't have a military background might look at the documents and not see between the lines so much because we're not military guys. Now, this is a quote. So, one might find it extraordinary to think that nuclear weapons are even considered, a retired senior military officer who's been, like I said, briefed on what's going on, has said. The officer, this guy then talks of basically a perfect storm that's, you know, in his mind, it sort of occurred naturally, when of course nothing occurs naturally. These perfect storms are created, obviously, to bring nuclear weapons back into the picture. Reintroducing nuclear deterrence, the officer says, serves three purposes: to directly deter Iran from developing nuclear weapons or then from using them, to convince Israel not to use its own nuclear weapons. I thought they didn't have any.
Yeah, it's the worst kept secret in geopolitics, that, isn't it?
It was a conspiracy theory, right? You were anti-Semitic if you even suggested the fact that Israel had developed nuclear weapons. And especially if you tied it into the fact that JFK didn't want them to have them. And there's a whole new rabbit hole you can go down if you want. But now they just openly admitted it. But not actually making it like it's a statement that's on the news. Like, oh my goodness me, it was true actually. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It's just, we'll just stop them using theirs. Well, the ones they haven't got. Yeah, those ones.
Because they know most people won't read the small print.
It's mad, isn't it? So to try and convince Israel from not using their nuclear weapons by basically making it clear that the US would do it for them.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't blow up Tehran. We'll do it. And it's also, the third one is to dissuade Saudi Arabia from perceiving that they need to have nuclear weapons to counteract Iran or whatever. The White House claimed that in a telephone conversation between Trump and Putin, the two had agreed that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. Now, on the face of that, of course, let's not destroy anyone, thanks. But what this guy goes on to explain is that actually when they say destroy Israel, what that means is Iran having nuclear weapons. It's almost like a code language. He's basically saying when you hear someone say destroy Iran, Israel, it's Monday morning. What they're actually saying is, they can't have nuclear weapons. And then it says, CENTCOM Commander General Eric Kurelli told Congress last year, we will continue to develop military options for the Secretary of Defense and President should they be necessary. Because obviously what did make news was when Trump went on to bomb Yemen, obviously, the peace president went on to bomb Yemen. He then basically made the point that it's actually not really anything to do with Yemen. It's about Iran, and they will hold Iran responsible. And basically nothing's off the table. So basically, bombing the living daylights out of Iran isn't off the table. Of course, it's not, because it's the plan. We're being distracted left, right, and centre by Ukraine and Russia, whilst the media is focusing on that, and the media is largely ignoring what's going on here with Iran.
Yeah, it is. And this was one that was bubbling in the first presidency, 2016 to 2020. Many people remember there was fighter jets in the sky ready to go and bomb in Iran, and Trump supposedly called them off. He had John Bolton at the time as his national security advisor, who was part of the... careful doing that.
No, it was a full tash, not a little tash.
Mr.
John Bolton, he's famous for having a massive moustache, and big warhawk.
Mr. Pastry. He was part of the project for the New American Century. Obviously, John Bolton, back in the early 2000s, part of the Bush administration, along with many others, that wrote that particular document that talked about regime change in many countries, one of which was Iran. So it's clear this is the big one on the list, isn't it? Because Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Libya, they went relatively easily in terms of toppling those regimes. Doing that in Iran is not going to be like that. Iran military-wise have got a much bigger capability than those other nations. There's also a much bigger resistance against, the West in those countries than others. So it's a really, really interesting thing to see. We've seen Iran's been talked about more in the last 5 years than ever before. Whether it be the protests over there, which I can imagine kind of living there, it's an incredibly oppressive regime. It's certainly not one that's for the benefit of the people. However, were they orchestrated by the West? There's probably a lot of evidence to suggest that they were. And we've seen now it get very clear that Trump's provoking. They obviously took out that general, didn't they, a few years ago
Soleimani,
as well. And then since then, you've now, what you said about Yemen, he said that anything the Houthis do, he'll hold Iran responsible. They've obviously blamed Iran for a lot of what Hamas have done as well, a lot of what Hezbollah do in Lebanon. And it's been by attacking Hamas, by attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon, by attacking the Houthis in Yemen. It's just poking and poking and poking. And what's really interesting to see there as well is that on the surface, Iran and Russia are allies. They're very much allies. They're in each other's pockets. But when it comes to Israel, Putin's very much on the same side.
Well, who isn't?
Because he always has been, hasn't he?
Yeah, they all are.
Israel literally shot down a Russian plane, didn't they?
And nothing happened.
Absolutely nothing happened.
It's the end-of-level boss, mate. What Iran has as well, though, is it has China. I think China probably uses it because of its location strategically.
Yep.
The old Silk Road and all that kind of stuff. But they do have they have people mistake that they will go, oh yeah, Iraq and Iran, dude. It's not the same thing.
No, it's really not.
It's not the same thing. And any kind of war is not a good thing. So to see the odd, MAGA type that was supposedly anti-war, then cheering it on, is it's quite disappointing, really. Yeah,
it's very disappointing, and we will see what happens. But when you talk about the Third World War, the conflict, Iran are very much part of that conversation. Very much part of that conversation.
Yeah. All you need to do is basically, if you want to know what the plan is, look at who Benjamin Netanyahu has asked the US to invade in the last sort of 15, 20 years. And you just tick off every single one of them. Every single one of them. From Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Iran, every single one. And Iran's is the big one.
It is the big one. It's the one they've been definitely building up to by isolating it. And also having what all those nations that they've invaded has done is increase massively the proximity of the US military to Iran. They've got bases all around. There's a graphic we'll put up now. Iran wants war. Look how close they put their country to our military bases. There's so many surrounding that region that's not an accident in any way, shape or form. They've been building up to this in a carefully planned order.
No.
So speaking of World War III, because this is very clear that the fault lines were drawn, or are being drawn, that have been talked about for decades and decades by many. Political Zionism, or the West, as you can kind of that, against the East, essentially East versus West. The two major countries that have had a history of, socialism, communism, Russia and China, And then other nations that will jump in with them, Iran, as we've mentioned, being one, North Korea probably being another one, and maybe a handful of others dotted around. Now, when Trump was running for presidency, one of the key things that he ran on was being, one you've said, being a peace president, was also that he would get this Ukraine-Russia conflict solved in a day, 20 minutes.
24 hours.
24 hours, basically. One phone call and it'll all be solved. Well, he obviously knows that's not true. The people around him know that's not true. So when last week and the weeks before, there was talks of peace, there was talks of summits being held about, restarting the concept of having ambassadors to each country between Russia and the US. When all that started, you had the MAGA lot, you had the Trumpers all coming out saying, look, you were wrong. Look, he's doing what he said he would do. How are you justifying this? And we all sat and go, okay, on the surface, what's happening looks good, but let's see what actually comes of it. And so far, what's come of it is absolutely nothing. And this is a story from the BBC, but this is all around the media channels yesterday. Trump is very angry. I can't imagine him getting any redder.
I can imagine him. He's fierce when he's angry.
I'll be more angry than anyone's ever been before. Trump very angry with Putin over ceasefire negotiations. Donald Trump has said that he's very angry and pissed off with Russian President Vladimir Putin after weeks of attempting to negotiate a ceasefire in Ukraine. In an NBC News interview, the US president criticized Putin for attacking Ukrainian President Zelensky's credibility and threatened to impose a 50% tariff. Didn't Trump do that like 2 weeks ago? Didn't he say that he was a dictator because he hadn't had an election? So isn't that exactly the same thing?
It's different when other people do it.
It's very different, yeah. Putin suggested the possibility of a UN-run government in Ukraine to organise new elections and begin peace talks. Also, just to clarify on that, didn't Zelensky say within the last couple of weeks, if I have to go to get peace, that's fine?
Yeah.
So, essentially, if you look at it from a surface level without going deeper at what the real plan is, all Putin said essentially is, well, yeah, all right then.
Yeah, but there's so much bait and switch, isn't there?
There is.
Like, I'm on this side now. No, I'm that side now. No, I'm that side now. No, oh yeah, Zelensky's not worn a shirt and tie. I don't like him now. I'll struggle to keep up.
It is, and it is. What I'm trying to work out, is that deliberate just to make people do that constantly? Or are certain things, because Trump's such a moron, are certain things kind of a bit off the cuff and then someone has a word in a quiet room afterwards and says, yeah, you're going to go back on that. That's not what's happening.
I think for me, I think everything's orchestrated and everything's planned. I think what you're creating is a situation where the US can say, we tried.
Oh yeah,
we
definitely.
Tried, but it wasn't happening. They weren't playing ball because fundamentally they don't want peace in Ukraine, Russia. It's about escalating this and bringing Iran and all these other things in. So whatever you see in terms of big global players seeking peace, it's all just lip service for the cameras. It's not real.
Yeah,
it's all theatre. I mean, that whole thing with Zelensky and Vance.
Oh, completely.
Who I also think, I had this conversation yesterday. Someone commented on something I'd said, and they were like, do you get the feeling that Vance is being promoted to the point where he will one day be president when they try and pull some psyop assassination on Trump? And I did say, I've had this discussion with Rich before on WhatsApp, that I've never seen a vice president elevated so much as JD Vance. And I don't think that's an accident.
No, I agree. It was him that dominated that conversation in the White House where it all kicked off, wasn't it?
But the whole thing was theatre to me, Jay.
Oh,
I was watching
theatre.
it and I was going, this is like watching a Channel 4, sitcom or something. It's ridiculous.
Well, if you look at the bio of Zelensky, of Trump and of Vance, which most people don't get, all three of them have got actor. Yeah. Vance has done acting previously, all actors, and he pulled it off again in Greenland over the last week. But essentially, what this has done is derail what everyone said was the start of a peace talk. It's basically taken it back to square one. Apparently, Putin said he'd be very shocked if there's a ceasefire agreement this year, which is another 8 months to go. Exactly. All of which is just push the concept of peace further and further away, which is exactly what they want. And this kind of rhetoric is probably going to only continue because all Trump knows how to do is chuck his weight around, and he's a big lad.
Well, you're waiting for the powder keg to go. I mean, Zelensky, he mentioned something about Putin not surviving or whatever, and then within 24 hours a limo blows up or whatever that was part of his motorcade, but then actually maybe it wasn't. Lots of umming and ahhing. You think I can?
That happened a few years ago, if you remember rightly. They took out a driver, didn't they? Was it in I can't remember where it was, but Putin's driver was taken out. He wasn't in a car.
He wasn't, but someone was.
Yeah.
But it was in Russia. Yeah, he was taken on with a head-on collision.
Yeah, it was, and it's interesting to see. It is very interesting to see. I think what you said last week is very interesting and appropriate, which is that we are in false flag territory. We really are, and with the tensions as they are, it could only take one. It could be a Gulf of Tonkin, Pearl Harbor. It could be something that ignites this from a cold conflict into a hot conflict. Because essentially, unofficially or officially, really, if you have a brain cell to look at it, we are at war with Russia right now. We are at war with Russia. We are at war with Iran. Whether that's the entirety of NATO, you've only got to see the stories coming out of Germany today about conscription, about the massive increase in defence spending, about the change of dynamic that Germany always was quiet after World War II because they were seen as European aggressors. Well, actually, that's got to change now. We've got to get this war hawk mentality back in the population. All these stories are out there. Yeah. That we're at war with Russia right now. Just no one's fired a missile yet. But it won't take much for it to come. No,
but Zippy Starmer and Macron were talking about, they are 100% having troops on the ground in Ukraine. As soon as those British troops are in Ukraine,
easy to target.
It's easy to target them and say it was the Russians, and I could see that happening. But it's
is there two people you would rather less be in charge of an army than Starmer and Macron?
Well, yeah, I mean, Macron was groomed as a kid, so there's some weird stuff going on there.
Two biggest beta males you've ever seen.
Yeah, but that's why they're there, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
That's why they're there.
Trudeau's close behind.
Okay, so moving on to the UK then. Now, I'll say this quickly because I've been accused of this, and we've been accused of this as a channel. I know our dad has as well. In terms of your comment on America, sort your own country out, mate. It's nothing to do with you. Well, it kind of is, though, because everything that goes on in America, all these decisions that are made affect British people. In fact, they affect the whole world. The fact that even I said in that first story that British jets are involved in this targeting of Iran. The RAF are assisting Israel in intelligence as they're bombing the hell out of Gaza. We are up to our neck in it.
The other thing is, your Ukraines, your Irans are a lot closer to England than they are to the US if it all kicks off.
Yeah. So this story, it's another uplifting one from Monday. Ethnic minority suspects are being given priority for bail. Well, okay, that sounds like equality. Transgender and ethnic minority people are being given priority for bail under new guidelines drawn up by the Ministry of Justice. That's interesting. Judges and magistrates are being told to prioritise these groups because they may be at disproportionately high risk if they're held in custody. Okay. The guidelines ask judges to consider that some defendants may have experienced trauma through racism and discrimination. The document seen by Mail Online advises this trauma may have been experienced personally by those known to the defendant, intergenerationally, so not even things that have affected them. Oh, mate, can I get out of jail early, please? Why? Oh, my granddad got punched in the face in Argos. Oh, mate, yeah, out you go. Yeah, intergenerationally, and relayed to the defendant. So something they've been told about. Yeah, not even granddad just got punched in Argos, but granddad told me about the fact that one day he got punched in Argos. Oh, right, let me out then. As a result of important historical events. Okay, I don't know if the Argos thing's an historical event, but whatever.
Don't know, it's been around a while.
Yeah.
Maybe Blockbuster.
Yeah, it sets out key criteria for identifying priority defendant cohorts, which includes women, pregnancy or maternity, young adults, and 18 to 25-year-old people with mental health conditions, and those deemed to be vulnerable. Now, I looked at that, and obviously everyone's angry, as they should be, because it's ridiculous, this two-tier justice and all this kind of stuff. That basically, when you look at the list of people that get off or are basically, essentially open to getting off early, there's only one group that's not there, and that's white men.
We're at the bottom of the pole, mate.
But that's it. That's what they're saying, that these are the people that should be considered. It's literally like inviting, you've got a class of 30 kids and you invite 29 of them to the birthday party. It's exactly what's going on. Yeah. It's not like they're going, we're just going to get this handful of people. No, we're going to get everyone but
except you.
Everyone but you. Until the draft comes to go and die for Zelensky, and then you're going to be top of that list, son.
Do they go into detail as to what kind of crimes these people have committed?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Just it's a case of if someone's up for bail, they should be essentially considered first because they're not white men. So you look at that and you go, well, this is ridiculous. People are angry about it kicking off. And I'm like, you're creating such a systematic thing now, because it's not just this in the justice system, it's across everything, that you're making people angry. You're making people, okay, they're angry at the justice system, but they're also looking at the other demographics and they're annoyed at them. So you create this division. And I feel like, I know the guy went to prison for saying that civil war was coming, but I'm going to say it anyway. If things don't change and they continue going the same trajectory, you're going to have some form of civil unrest and some kind of civil war. And that's what they want.
Well, we've already seen that. You know, Southport was a trigger, which then led to everything that happened afterwards, where all of that anger, all of that frustration, and, you know, the way a lot of people behaved was completely abhorrent. However, that ignoring that anger, ignoring that, in some people, deep, you know, sense of injustice, and as we've seen, that some of that's very well founded, that just creates that something within people that it doesn't take much for that to trigger you. If you think about it, for example, if someone comes up and pushes you, let's say you're in school and a kid pushes you, and you turn around to the teacher and say, I've just been pushed. No, I didn't see it. And they do it again. No, I didn't see it. Eventually, you're just going to hit them back. Eventually, you're going to have to take it into your own hands because you don't feel that the people that are there to protect you are doing anything about it. So what do you do? Just wait to continue to get beaten up? Or do you stand up for yourself? And that's, I think, how most people see it is they know the police and local authorities are not going to do anything. You can apply that logic to so many things, whether it be grooming gangs, whether it be, you know, violence in the streets, whether it be drug problems, so many different things we're seeing. And it's not just, you know, minorities, but there's a lot of proportion, particularly with the grooming gang side of it, that you are just completely ignored when it comes to, and you know, exposing it, when it comes to reporting it, X, Y, and Z. That eventually you're going to have vigilante groups. That's what you're going to have.
But that's what they want.
I
think that's intentional.
Yeah, that is what they want.
Even like you've described there a situation where someone's pushing you and you're turning to the teacher or the police officer or whatever, the perceived authority, and saying, are you going to do something about this? It's not even that they're not seeing it or they're ignoring it. They're arresting you for it. Yeah. And so it's so ridiculous now that you've got a situation where, like you say, grooming gangs, all these things, even burglaries. Good luck getting a copper to come around your house if your house gets burgled. You know, I remember having a bike nicked once, which wasn't a normal bike theft because they actually broke into my back garden and outhouse and nicked it. So it was a break-in entering as well. The copper, was a nice enough guy, but he just went, here you go, mate. And he just gave me the bit of paper with the details in it to give to the insurance company. And he was like, he even said to me, he said, what do you want me to do? I was like, find who done it. And he was like, well, that's not going to happen. There you go, but that's for your insurance company. So that, not bothered. Yet you get two parents in the UK that are having a conversation on a WhatsApp group where they're basically slagging off the school. Yeah. And they get 6 officers. There's footage of it you can find online. 6 officers turn up at their door to arrest them in front of their kid, in front of their 9-year-old kid, for things they say on WhatsApp. So you're creating this situation where people are so angry that in the end they're going to go bang, and when they go bang, they'll send the boys in because that's what they want. That's
what they want. That's exactly what they want. They are winding people up. They're winding them up constantly, ready for them to pop.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's a difficult one because people will listen to us and go, well, what do you want to do about it then? Just ignore it. No, absolutely not. But there are ways and means. And, you know, when you feel yourself getting to the point where you're like, do you know what? Mate, just kind of go, this is what they want me to do. This is how they want me to feel. They want me to chuck a brick at a copper. That's exactly what they want. They want me to take to the streets. So let's just breathe and let's just think this out.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. The best protest I think that's ever happened, and unfortunately it's not led to a complete change, was Iceland in 2008. So in Iceland, when the banking crash happened, there was no violence. They literally just surrounded Parliament, wouldn't let the politicians out until they fixed it.
Yeah.
Did no violence, nothing was thrown, nothing was, no one was murdered, nothing was killed. There was no punches, no fire bombs thrown. Just literally, we don't accept this. And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Mass civil non-compliance.
Simple
as that. It doesn't need to be civil unrest. We don't need to fight anyone. But a civil non-compliance of, you're going to do this. No, I'm not.
Well, an easy one is, we've seen it starting to happen. We saw it a few weeks ago with when Bovir went into Arla. Arla was just left everywhere on the shelves. All the other milk was sold. People were leaving that. That started sending a message. We're not going to accept this.
Yeah, we're not having it.
If conscription comes, if there's a war, and everyone just goes, no, I'm not doing that. You're going to laugh, mate. What are they going to do? Arrest every 25-year-old lad in the country? They can't do that, and they know they can't do that.
Yeah, and that's the point. When they come, say if they identify someone to arrest and they turn up, then you surround that person's house. So they can't arrest them. We stick together. And that's how we win.
We absolutely stick together.
Because we outnumber these, I was going to call them something, I was going to call them a rat, but rats aren't that bad. Really.
We outnumber them a silly amount to 1.
We do. Okay, right.
Right, final story. Everyone's is he the favourite or is he the second favourite to Trump? Poster boy of freedom, Mr. Musk, who's done one thing, which is allow people to have a go at people with pink hair on Twitter again. Apart from that, every other thing he does is very much off the page of the WEF and of the agenda. Anyway, this is the story. Musk's XAI, buys his social media platform X. So that story is from the BBC, but Canadian broadcaster Josh Sigurdson, fantastic guy, has done a deep dive into this, into what that really means. So firstly, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about, $33 billion was the sale price.
They do like the number 33.
They love it, don't they? That's $11 billion less than he paid for it, supposedly.
Yeah, not that he even paid for it anyway, but yeah.
No, and all the names of the investors and all the names of the directors on it are redacted, aren't they? So you can't see who they are. About 25 people on the original purchase that you can't see who they are.
Diddy was in there, wasn't he?
I'm sure he was. So since he's bought X, okay, he's allowed some people to come back on and talk a bit. But what he's done, which is the key, or one of the big keys, is firstly he's allowed an Israeli firm to do all of the monetization stuff and therefore get all your biometric data and a lot of information from you. Because it's bought by someone who people think is the freedom of speech hero, they're giving a lot more to it in terms of personal information and so on. So it's massively a harvesting operation. But the big thing that it's done is implement the algorithm, which essentially makes it like you're not there anyway.
Yeah.
You know, you have people, you're a good example, that have massive followings that get a handful of the reach because you're lawful but awful, as they say. So that's what their algorithm. And anyone that pushes the agenda, anyone that pushes Trump, anyone that pushes Musk, or anyone that says anything that is remotely pushing the agenda in any way, shape or form, they get massively promoted. They get huge numbers. They get huge reach, largely bigger than their actual reach. We've seen a lot. And people come from nowhere and suddenly everywhere. You know, Gary Stevenson, the Economist guy, is everywhere at the moment. When on the surface, he should be the opposite of what Musk would be promoting in terms of what his political beliefs are, if you listen to them. But essentially, apart from that freedom of speech element, which is obviously smoke and mirrors, it's not actually true. He lets you back, but you don't get any reach. Carbon credits, Musk's all over it.
Big fan.
Universal basic income, Musk's all over it. And the big one, which is why we're talking about this story, AI, whether that be chips in the brain, whether that be AI taking jobs and making more services obsolete of people and automated, or whether it be the implementation of robots into society, which he did an interview, I think we covered a few weeks ago with Ted Cruz, where he said in 20 years they'll be walking among us like, there'll be literally millions of them walking among us.
I bet they already are.
I bet they already are. Yeah, anyone that's not seen the series Westworld on Sky, I'd urge you to take a look at that, because that's basically what's coming. Would you even know the difference if one walked past you? All of those things, he's very much on the page of the agenda and the page of the cult. So this is a weird one. This is one to try and unpick as to why this has happened, because there's a lot of different ways you could look at this. He's just sold it to himself. Some people look at that and say you're fishing for something that isn't there. He sold it to himself. Yeah. Lots of entrepreneurs
just freeing up some money or whatever.
Yeah, lots of entrepreneurs, lots of wealthy people do move assets around, like you say, free up money, lower tax liability. They might claim this is a way for him to get around some of the censorship he's supposedly had to do in countries like Brazil and Australia and so on. What's your take?
To be honest, I think with the whole X thing, they always tell you, right, for a start, like these people don't tend to be particularly secretive really in terms of their plan, because they know most people won't check. Well, there's that. And I also think that, call me a tinfoil hat again, there is like an element, I think there's almost an esoteric element of it that almost you need to tell people. You need to tell them, and if they do nothing, then that in itself is consent. It's
like the vampire needs to be invited in. Yeah, the vampire needs
to be invited in. And if you invite him in, then he'll chow down on your throat. But if you don't invite him in, then he can't. And I think there is a little bit, whether people out there think that that's a karmic thing, that you're almost basically foregoing any negative karmic energy because essentially they've let you do it kind of thing. But he's told us about he wanted X to be an everything app. He wants it to be a banking app. He wants it to basically be
everything.
Control your life. Does everything. And obviously this is the same guy that's putting chips in people's brains. It's the same guy that's chucking tens of thousands of satellites in low orbit to beam 5G and 6G and 7G to come down on the planet.
He wants to send you to Mars.
Yeah, that will have. You would need all that in place if you're going to have this social credit system. You're going to have this this setup so that everyone knows where everyone is at certain points, and you can't go here and you can't go there. You know, what you can buy, what you can't buy, how many steaks you've had this week, all that kind of stuff. It needs that structure in place technologically. He's the man who's doing it. Yeah, everyone's cheering him on, like you say, because you can have a go at some transgender like activist online, which you couldn't before or whatever.
The driverless cars is another aspect.
Yeah, that's another part of it as well. And of course, it'd be nice to get driven everywhere, but obviously, if you want to go somewhere that's off limits, then the computer says no, and that's the whole point of driverless cars and stuff. The other thing as well with him is this is this big alternative guy. Why was having to go at Elon Musk? Well, if he was as alternative as you claim he is, one, he wouldn't have been allowed to buy Twitter anyway. And not only was he allowed to buy Twitter, they actually tried to take him to court to make him buy it.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
The investors in it, lots of big players gave him money to buy it, to take it over. Why would you do that if he was an outsider? And the other thing is the number of Pentagon contracts this dude's got.
Yeah.
His companies are basically, not that he's running them anyway, but he's too busy on Twitter, but these companies are all basically held together and bankrolled by the security agencies. Why would they do that if he was an outsider? They wouldn't.
They wouldn't, and he was given contracts by the Pentagon before he'd even fired a rocket at SpaceX, before he had any credibility to deliver on what he said he was going to deliver on. They gave him contracts. Tesla lost money for years and years and years. They never had the technological capability to pull off what they've pulled off. It just got bankrolled and bankrolled and bankrolled, and they'd have latest series rounds of investment where whatever he said he would deliver, he wouldn't deliver, but there would be another round of investment. Yeah. And it just, you don't do that if you're an outsider. This guy, if he was genuinely an outsider and a threat to the system, they could finish financially in 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, because everything he has is based on credit and leverage. He doesn't really have any actual assets. It's all based on confidence and a myth. With all the money he used to buy Twitter, he didn't buy Twitter. How many different banks and investors was there? He didn't use his own money, did he?
No, this is the
thing.
They
could get rid of him in 2 minutes if they wanted.
With companies like this, they're part of the agenda. They're not an outsider. They're not there for you and me. They're there as part of the agenda. The ones that can lose money hand over fist. Amazon were losing $1 billion a year for how many years while they destroyed the independent book and publishing, because obviously that's where they started out in publishing. They destroyed independent book sellers and wholesalers and all that kind of stuff, so they could basically now control everything. So they can get to a point now where if they want to burn books, all they need to do is basically just click, nope, not accepted. Our dad's books, the amount of them that are banned on Amazon, honestly. But they were able to lose $1 billion a year. Uber were able to lose $1 billion a year because the plan of Uber, whilst it's, bless you, destroying independent cab firms and stuff like that, it's also about pushing this driverless car narrative. Yeah. Uber openly admit that isn't a secret, that their whole thing is for driverless taxis.
Yeah, the driver is their biggest cost, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So they can lose $1 billion a year. Who's funding that?
YouTube ran at a loss for a long time as well before Google bought it.
Anyone watching this, you start a business. Say, for instance, maybe you save up over a few years. Maybe you get a redundancy package from an old job and you go, do you know what? I'm going to start a business. Maybe you can afford to lose a little bit of money for the first 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Maybe. You can't afford to lose $1 billion, but these people can. Why?
Because they're bankrolled. They're bankrolled. And the whole point as well, which is really, really important, is many of you will be familiar with the whole garage door concept and the whole, Harvard dorm room where Zuckerberg started Facebook concept. And, this geek started this behind this in his bedroom, all that. And all these things just happen to grow into these massive platforms that are exactly what the agenda needs to get certain bits of information from you. Many people won't know that the CIA had an operation to harvest data and so on that they dropped the day Facebook launched. So clearly that's no coincidence.
They just renamed it.
They just renamed it.
Yeah.
So these people that build these massive technologies, they absolutely are not built by accident. They are absolutely planted. People like Zuckerberg are just figureheads. No way Zuckerberg built Facebook. Have you seen the guy talk? No way Musk runs his companies, as you pointed out.
Not enough hours in the day.
For the same reason. I spend all my time engineering. Do you? How?
Yeah.
How you got a 45-hour day instead of a 24?
Consent, maybe.
So it's all these platforms that, in their very different ways, all support the furthering of the agenda, whether that be suppression of information, whether that be harvesting of data, whether that be the dumbing down of children, whatever it might be. It's very clear that they are all working in unison. And this whole idea that they're all enemies and they all don't like each other and compete with each other, they don't. They're all after the same thing. They're just after slightly different audiences. If you look at all those social channels across them, they all appeal to a different audience. Instagram appeals to a slightly younger audience, so does TikTok. YouTube to a slightly older audience. Twitter to a more political audience. Facebook to a more sort of family audience. They all work together to tick a box so that they get you some way, shape, or form.
And all of them are free. And you know what they say, if the product's free, that's because you're the product.
Well, 100%.
And that's the point. But there you go. Anyway, I hope we haven't been too neg for a Monday. The uplifting part is we could say no to all of it. That's the point. That's where the real power is. The real dynamic of power is that we just say no to all of it. You're going to be conscripted, as you say. No. We're going to bring in austerity. No. You need to do this. You need to do that. Going back to COVID, you need to lock down. No. No.
There you go. End on a positive.
Enough. Anyway, coffee.
I'm going to get a second one.
So I've only had one this morning, which for me, the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and I'm like, don't talk to me until I've had at least one, but two will make all the difference. If you head over to shop.iconic.com, you can use the code TRENDIN and that gets you 10% off the range of Iconic coffees.
See you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
See you tomorrow. Bye.